So, welcome to another TAD Talk where Amanda and I speak about all things talent acquisition and recruitment marketing. And today we're going to focus on budgeting. The budget season is approaching, and we want to overlay the budget process against the backdrop of how the labor market has been changing. A lot of things have changed in the last year to the benefit of employers, with more job seekers entering the employment space again. It's still a highly competitive market, but we are seeing those candidates come back to platforms. A couple of stats that have seen recently on some of the vendor decks that we do is that the labor force participation rate has just returned to its pre-pandemic levels, which is amazing. It doesn't mean that we've got all of our positions filled, but we are seeing the openings that outnumbered the unemployed. Now we're seeing about 1.7 job openings per unemployed worker, where in the past couple of years it's been substantially higher than that. So it's coming down to a better level so that we can actually find candidates for the positions. In places like healthcare and restaurant and retail, we're still struggling to see candidate volume, but it is starting to open up a little bit more. As we look at our candidates' activity, when we run metrics for them, a lot of times we see where those candidate levels are increasing month over month, which is, again, nice since we haven't seen that in a few years. One thing that we did see recently in an article, or I did see recently in an article, is that people are saying that the Great Resignation is over. Right now, because of the economic headwinds that we're seeing from organizations and their instability, we're starting to see what they call the big stay. So we have to have a phrase for everything, obviously, in this world. So the big stay is now what they're calling the individuals. Now we're going to see employees trying to stay at organizations longer. They don't want to be the last person in so that they're first person out if layoffs are going to happen. So as we're talking about budgeting, some of these will help us with determining how much budget we'll need. Some of these conditions that have improved over the last couple of years will be beneficial to the way that we budget. So Amanda, do you want to talk a little bit about what we do to look back on the metrics as we start working with our clients on the budgeting process?
Yeah, so a lot of recruiting budgets are attributed to media platforms, obviously. Platforms like Indeed, ZipRecruiter are popular. So what's important is to take a look at the metrics. A lot of times when we work with our clients, they may have all sorts of reports, but are they really breaking down the data to understand what each one is providing them? So we do a thorough review to make sure you understand really what the media is doing. Is it bringing in applicants, and is it bringing in the kind of applicants that you're looking for, the quality that you're looking for? Are you looking at your hiring information, the source report that you have from your ATS? Is it breaking down for you where the actual hire is coming from, and does it match up with what you're seeing with your media? So overall, are you taking a look at, from beginning to end, what is it that your platforms are doing for you? Once we have a breakdown of that, we look at, does it make sense to renew the contracts you may have or the monthly spends that you're using? Because just because it's been, something that you've worked on before, let's say you've had a platform you've worked with for 10 years and that's just what you've been doing, doesn't mean that you need to renew that or that you need to keep spending a higher budget there. So we take a look to make sure that the platforms that you're working with are something that you should continue to work with. Just because you've had that partnership doesn't necessarily mean that you need to continue it if it's not working. So again, starting with the candidate media performance, hire report, and taking a holistic view to make sure that the platforms that you're working on are ones that you should still be working on.
And which metrics do you think are the most important to look at when we're assessing whether the media performance was there for them or not?
I think the most important is looking at your number of applicants, obviously, is important, but the quality of them, that's always the hardest. So that's why the source report is important to take a look at to see where the hire actually came from. So looking at it on both ends is really important when we're looking at all of the different data out there. We don't care about clicks. We don't care about impressions as much. We really want to know, again, where did the applicant come from and were they hired from that source specifically?
Yeah, I think we have to, a lot of times we take a look at what's not pulling in candidates too. So those jobs that are so hard to fill, where did we see candidates coming from? And sometimes when we're looking at those source reports, it's not necessarily a media platform. So how do we do things better within the organization? So the employee referral program or some of the communications for the onboarding portion. But there's a lot of pieces that fall into this. One thing that you touched on that I think is really important is don't feel like you have to keep buying from a vendor when the results aren't there. We've seen this too many times, or they keep buying things that they didn't actually use this year. They'll rebuy it because the fear is that if you don't rebuy it, then your price goes up on a different product on that contract, and it does. but you still end up saving money because you're not buying something that you're not going to use. So don't get in a cycle where you feel like you're committed, you know that vendor really well, you don't want to hurt their feelings, and buy something that's not going to be applicable to the organization, because you may be assessed on it. Somebody might ask you at some point, how did that work for you, or what's the ROI? And if there's other products and services in there that it's increasing the ROI on, whatever you're buying, it's going to be detrimental probably. One of the other things that we talk to our clients about, and I kind of touched on it a minute ago, is those foundational pieces. We probably talk a lot about the foundational pieces, but this is a good time when you're talking about budget. Are there things next year that you need to fix for the coming years? I know during COVID, in the last, prior to this year, in the last 3 years, people were starting to look at, what does my career website say? What does my employment brand say? We had a little bit more time when we weren't recruiting necessarily to say, let's look at those pieces. But really, you do need to budget those elements into it, because it could be a substantial price point. When you're creating a brand, and we talked about this on one of our other TAD Talks that's currently on our website, there's a lot of elements that go into creating a brand or updating the career website, and there's a lot of time and resources that might be needed. It could be done internally, or you could turn to an agency or a platform to do that type of work. And so you just want to make sure that you have some estimates or include that in the budgeting process. Some of the other pieces are, if you want to touch on, do we need to do any kind of remodeling of the employee referral program? There's a lot of automation and online tools that can be used right now. So how do we incorporate something like that in to make that employee referral program more robust and allow more people to come in the door? And the other one that I know you talk about a lot is social media. And so social media is a big one. So how do we invest resources? Because it's not just a paid resource, it's a time resource that we're looking at.
I think one of the big things with social media too is not just organic posts and not just paid advertising, but making sure you have a brand ambassador, you have people internally that are helping get your content together, posting the content. Even if you're not working with an agency, you still need, or if you are working with an agency, either way, you need to have a team internally that's willing to support the employer brand side of social media. Again, it takes a team. So having multiple people that are able to contribute to the success of your social media is important on the recruitment side.
Absolutely. And I think another big one is the automation. So many things can be automated. We're talking about AI, we're talking about generative AI when it comes to the chat GPTs, but what can we do to automate the process to help the recruitment team as well as the job seeker experience? And so when we do that, we might want to look at platforms. Now is a good time to start demoing and considering if there's ways that we can automate some portion of it to make it a better experience for you, the entire group. I mean, whether you're talking about your own team, recruiting team, or the candidates that are coming in. I think one of the things that we took a look at, or I read recently, was that it takes 6.7 emails to schedule an interview. And so even just implementing something like interview scheduling software or platforms will help with that candidate experience, and also help your recruiters not have to answer all those emails back and forth with what dates and times might work for them. So I think in wrapping up, what we do with our clients is we start to speak to them about, what's worked. We're looking at the metrics. They've given us a source of hire, source of applicant metrics. We're marrying that with all the media information that we have, so we know what's worked for them from a media perspective. We also need to marry that with having a conversation with their recruiting team and saying, what are you using? What do you want to use? How is it working? To understand that if the seats that we bought, for example, are going to be the ones that we want on LinkedIn or on Indeed or CareerBuilder, whoever it may be, are those the ones that we should be buying, or is there something better out there? There's a lot of tools like Seek Out and Rocket Reach that might be a better investment than maybe a LinkedIn seat, especially because of the price, just because LinkedIn has gotten so pricey. So we do like to look to see what people are using or want to use as we look forward to that. And then we start pulling together the pricing. So based on the media or the foundational piece, we start to pull together pricing that we can then iterate with our clients. So what do we need? What do we not need? Pulling together what the budget may look like. There are a lot of times we get presented with a budget reduction conversation from our clients. And so how do we help them get what they can get and still have the right tools for the recruitment team, but maybe shave off 20% from the budget from last year, especially when you look at the layoffs that might have been happening in certain industries like the IT sector. Anything that you want to add? I just, of course, rambled on again.
I think you covered it all really well. Budgeting time is here. So if you have questions or want someone to look at your budget that's an outside perspective, contact Stacey or I at Wicresoft. We are here to help and happy to audit things. That's part of our process that we do, is free audits to take a look at if your media is working, if your employer brand or your career website needs help, or even if you need to automate some things, because the quickest way to lose a candidate is through your applicant tracking system, usually, and to process to get there. So we do a full scope review of all sorts of things. So
Yeah, and a lot of times we'll do that at no cost just to see if there's something that we can help with. So that's one of the services we provide. So please feel free to reach out to us and ask those questions. And thank you for joining us for another TAD Talk.
thank you.